The monotonous sound of the heart monitor filled the air, its steady rhythm marking time in an environment that seemed out of touch with reality. John Ramirez's eyelids fluttered, heavy as if they weighed a ton. He struggled to open them, feeling a strange combination of weakness and confusion. When he finally managed to do so, the soft sunlight filtering through the gray curtains of the hospital room made his eyes blink rapidly, trying to adjust. The room was sterile, decorated only with the bare essentials. Everything around him seemed suffocatingly familiar, yet strangely new. He tried to move, but his muscles were stiff, almost atrophied. Trying to understand where he was and what had happened, John realized that he was trapped in his own body, a prisoner of a situation he could not comprehend. A nurse entered the room, the sound of her footsteps waking John from his confused thoughts. She smiled softly when she noticed that he was awake, but the smile did not reach her eyes. There was something strange in her expression, as if she hesitated to share some information. "Welcome back, Mr. Ramirez," the nurse said, adjusting the 4-drip hanging beside the bed. "You're at New York General Hospital. I don't know if you remember, but there was an accident. That was 3 years ago." Her words hit John like an electric shock. 3 years? How was that possible? The world around him began to spin as he tried to process the information. He struggled to speak, but his voice came out hoarse and broken. 3 years. The nurse nodded, her expression showing sympathy. "Yes, sir. You've been in a coma for 3 years. We know this must be a shock for you, but we're here to help. You have a long road ahead to recover." Her words echoed in John's mind, but they made no sense. How had his life changed so much while he was unconscious? And where was his wife, Emily? He tried to remember the last moments before the accident, but his mind was a tangle of disconnected memories and darkness. The void in his memory was terrifying. As the days passed, John began to gain enough strength to get out of bed and walk around the room. The daily physical therapy was painful, but he forced himself to continue, driven by the desire to understand what had happened in his life during the time he was gone. Emily's absence troubled him deeply. Every time he asked about her, the evasive answers from the doctors and nurses only increased his anxiety. Finally, one day, he insisted that the doctor in charge of his case be straightforward. "Doctor," John began, sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor. "I need to know, where is my wife? Where is Emily?" The doctor took a deep breath before responding, his words loaded with caution. "Mr. Ramirez, there's something you need to know. During the time you were in a coma, the lives of the people around you changed drastically. Your wife, Emily, became distant." "What do you mean by distant?" John interrupted, his heart racing. "Emily, she is involved with someone else now," the doctor said, choosing his words carefully. "She believed you were not going to wake up." John felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath his feet. The world around him blurred as he tried to comprehend what he had just heard. His wife, the woman he trusted above all, had moved on without him. And worst of all, she was involved with another man. "Who?" John managed to murmur, his voice filled with pain and disbelief. "Who is he?" The doctor hesitated for a moment before answering. "Michael Adams. He took on a significant role in your company during your absence." The mention of Michael made John's blood run cold. Michael, his former partner and friend, was now the man with whom Emily was involved? The sense of betrayal was overwhelming, an unbearable weight that left him breathless. The pieces began to fit together in his mind, forming a terrible picture of the conspiracy that had left him at the mercy of his enemy and deprived him of his life. The days in the hospital dragged on, and with them, John's attempts to understand what had really happened. Every effort to remember the events that led to the coma seemed in vain until, one night, as the heavy silence took over the room, flashes of memory began to emerge. It was a business meeting. He was in the company's main office. Michael was by his side, his face displaying the calculated smile he always wore. Something was wrong in that conversation, something he couldn't quite define, but it made him uneasy. The memory was fragmented, with Michael's words echoing in his mind like a dark warning. You have to trust me, John. We're in this together. But Michael's tone, now that John was reliving that moment, seemed loaded with duplicity. The feeling of betrayal, which was once just a suspicion, was beginning to solidify into something more tangible. He could vaguely remember a heated argument, broken promises, but there were still important pieces missing to complete the puzzle. The next morning, John asked his doctor for more information about what had happened to him. The answers came slowly, but with them, the truth began to emerge. His accident had not been just a coincidence. The car he was traveling in had been sabotaged, and the investigation, curiously, never found the culprits. The shadow of conspiracy that was forming before him grew more threatening with each revelation. The memories of his friendship with Michael were now tainted by this new perspective. The man he once considered a close friend, a brother, was now the prime suspect in orchestrating John's downfall. And Emily, the woman he loved, was involved with that same man. The pain of her betrayal and the disappointment were deep, but John knew he couldn't let those emotions dominate him. He needed answers, and more than that, he needed justice. Determined to face the facts, John finally convinced Emily to visit him in the hospital. The reunion, however, was anything but comforting. When she entered the room, there was an icy distance between them, as if the 3 years of coma had created an abyss impossible to cross. Emily, John began, trying to keep his voice steady, we need to talk about what happened, about you and Michael. Emily looked away, her fingers nervously twisting the strap of her purse. John, I didn't want things to turn out this way, she whispered. But you weren't going to wake up and I was alone. That doesn't justify what you did, John responded, trying to keep his anger in check. Michael, he was behind all this, wasn't he? The accident, the accusations. He planned it all and you went along with it? Emily finally looked him in the eye, tears silently running down her face. I didn't know everything, John. He told me you would never wake up, that the company needed someone strong to carry on. And then, things just happened. The pain in her voice was evident, but it did not ease the torment John felt. He wanted to believe that Emily had been just a victim, manipulated by Michael, but the evidence of her complicity was undeniable. The woman he loved had made her choice, and that choice had destroyed him. Emily, I need you to help me, John said, his anger and sadness mixing in his voice. I'm going to put an end to this, but I need to know everything. I need to know what he did and how he did it. You have to tell me everything. Emily hesitated, struggling against the guilt and fear that dominated her. Finally, she nodded, knowing she had no other choice. If she wanted any chance of redemption, she had to cooperate with John. I'll help you, John. I'll tell you everything I know. With the information Emily shared, John began to grasp the magnitude of the betrayal. Michael had carefully manipulated everyone around him, using John's absence as an opportunity to take full control of the company, while also winning over Emily. Every detail Emily revealed fueled John's anger, but also solidified his determination to bring Michael down. John knew he couldn't do it alone. He needed someone he could trust, and the only person who came to mind was Hector Morales, his former attorney and lifelong friend. John reached out to him, and within days, Hector was by his side at the hospital, listening attentively to John's account of everything that had happened. This is more serious than I imagined, Hector said, his expression turning grim as John described Michael's actions. But with the right evidence, we can expose him and reclaim everything you've lost. We must be careful, John warned. Michael has a lot of influence now, and any misstep could cost us everything. He needs to be exposed publicly, in a way that leaves him no escape. Emily, sitting silently in a corner of the room, felt a knot in her chest as she heard those words. She knew that Michael's involvement in his crimes meant his end, but also that her own reputation would be ruined. Still, she decided to cooperate, aware that there was much more at stake than just her reputation. In the following days, John and Hector worked tirelessly, compiling a dossier with all the evidence they could gather. Emily, though reluctant, provided crucial details about suspicious financial transactions and Michael's manipulations within the company. Each new discovery was like a piece of a puzzle fitting perfectly, revealing a devastating picture of the corruption and betrayal that Michael had orchestrated. The plan began to take shape. At a shareholders' meeting, John would reintroduce himself to the corporate world, but this time with irrefutable evidence that would destroy Michael. Hector would ensure that the press was present, turning the meeting into a public spectacle from which Michael could not escape. As the day of the meeting approached, the tension mounted. John knew this would be the decisive moment, where he would either regain his life or lose everything at once. Emily, for her part, was torn between fear of what was to come and the hope that by helping John, she might find some form of redemption. The day of the meeting finally arrived, bringing with it an atmosphere filled with anxiety and anticipation. John, now stronger and more determined, entered the building where he had so often led with confidence and vision. The building, which once represented the pinnacle of his achievements, now seemed cold and distant, a place he barely recognized under Michael's control. The shareholders, journalists, and employees gathered in the large conference room, murmuring among themselves about John's unexpected return. Silence fell over the room when Michael entered, displaying the same calculated smile that John now recognized so well. Emily was by his side, looking paler and more nervous than ever. Hector began the meeting with a formal presentation, thanking everyone for their presence and mentioning the importance of this special meeting. Then, with a gesture, he invited John to take the stage. When John appeared, there was a murmur of surprise among the attendees. Many could not believe that he was back, especially with such determination in his gaze. "Ladies and gentlemen," John began, his firm voice resonating in the room, "I'm here today to clarify the truth about the past 3 years. Many of you were led to believe in lies that almost destroyed my life and my company. But today, those lies will be exposed." With a click, Hector projected onto the screen a series of documents, emails, and financial records, all detailing Michael's involvement in corrupt practices, including the sabotage that led to John's accident and subsequent coma. Each piece of evidence was a dagger plunged into Michael's reputation, which was now visibly shaken. "Michael Adams is not the man he appears to be," John continued, addressing the audience. "He used my coma as an opportunity to take control of everything I built while manipulating those I loved to protect himself." Emily was sitting in the front row, tears streaming down her face as the evidence was presented. She knew that, by the end of this, nothing would ever be the same again. But now, the truth was finally coming to light. Michael tried to defend himself, but the evidence was overwhelming. The expressions of the shareholders and members of the press made it clear that his career and freedom were in imminent danger. With the truth exposed, the conference room was in an uproar. The murmurs turned into a roar of indignation and surprise as the attendees absorbed the extent of Michael's betrayal. The tension in the conference room was palpable. Michael, now exposed and with no way out, struggled to maintain his composure, but the mask he wore began to crack. He knew that his attempts to defend himself were futile in the face of the irrefutable evidence presented by John and Hector. The control he believed he had over the situation was crumbling with each passing second. "This is a setup," Michael shouted, trying to gather the last remnants of his authority. "These documents were fabricated, manipulated by John to get revenge. There's no truth in any of this." But the eyes of the shareholders and the press were fixed on John, who remained resolute, unaffected by Michael's desperate accusations. He knew it was time to deliver the final blow. "Michael, your lies are over," John said, his voice as cold as ice. "You destroyed my life, tried to erase me from history, but you underestimated my ability to come back and fight. Now, it's you who will pay for what you've done." At that moment, the doors of the room opened, revealing the police officers who had been alerted about the meeting. They moved toward Michael, who, realizing that his end was near, made one last desperate move. He grabbed Emily by the arm, pulling her close to him. "She's as guilty as I am," Michael shouted, using her as a human shield. "Emily knew everything, participated in everything. If I go down, she goes down too." Emily, frightened and ashamed, tried to free herself from Michael's grip, but he held on tightly. John, seeing the scene unfold, felt his anger boil inside him. But at the same time, he knew he couldn't allow Michael to destroy more lives. "Let her go, Michael," John said, stepping forward but keeping his composure. "You've caused enough pain. This ends here." Michael laughed, a bitter and desperate laugh. "Do you think you can just fix everything? That you can walk away as the hero after all this? No, John. I'm taking you down with me." But before he could act, the police intervened, pulling Emily from his hands and restraining Michael. The struggle ended quickly, with Michael being subdued and handcuffed. As they led him out of the room, the look of defeat on his face was evident. He had lost everything. Emily collapsed to her knees, sobbing, unable to believe what had just happened. John approached her, his anger dissipating to give way to deep sadness. He extended his hand to help her up, but Emily refused, remaining on the floor, defeated. "John, I'm sorry," she murmured through her tears. I didn't know it would come to this." "I can't forgive what you did, Emily," John replied, his voice low and filled with pain. "But I'm not going to let you destroy yourself. You have to find a way to redeem yourself, to move on, without him." With those words, John walked away, leaving Emily to deal with the consequences of her choices. He knew that the wound of betrayal would take time to heal, but at that moment, he needed to focus on rebuilding his own life. The conference room had emptied, leaving behind only the echo of hushed conversations and disordered chairs. John remained silent, observing the space that once represented so much power and prestige. Now everything seemed different. There was a sense of emptiness, of something lost forever. Hector approached him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You did it, John. Michael will pay for his crimes, and the company is back under your control." John nodded, but his expression remained heavy. "Yes, but at what cost, Hector? I lost 3 years of my life. I was betrayed by the people I trusted the most. And now, even with justice served, none of it will bring back what I lost." Hector understood the weight of John's words. "It's true, John, but you've also gained something in this process. The truth. And with it, the opportunity to start over, to do things differently. Not everyone gets that chance." John reflected on that. It was true that, despite everything, he had the chance to rebuild his life. But he knew he would never be the same man as before. The scars of betrayal and lost time were deep, and it would take time to process everything that had happened. In the following days, the news of Michael's downfall spread through the city like wildfire. The company underwent restructuring, with John resuming control, but this time with a more critical and careful vision. He knew he would need to rebuild his image and trust, both personally and professionally. Emily, on the other hand, faced the consequences of her actions. Society was relentless in its judgment, and she withdrew from public life, seeking seclusion to deal with her guilt and shame. John did not seek her out again, but he knew she was trying to redeem herself in her own way. As John returned to work, he also began reconnecting with his family, who finally understood the truth behind his absence and the false accusations. Gradually, the relationships that had been damaged began to heal, bringing a sense of hope for the future. But John knew there was still a long way to go. He would need to find a new way to live, a new purpose that went beyond simply reclaiming what was his. The experience had changed him profoundly, and he was determined to use that to become a stronger and fairer person. Months had passed since the final confrontation with Michael, and John's life, although far from the same, was beginning to find a new balance. The company, under his leadership, went through a significant transformation. John implemented changes that were not only aimed at restoring the company's reputation, but also at ensuring it operated with integrity and transparency. But beyond business, John focused on something even more important: rebuilding his personal life. He had gone through moments of deep introspection, questioning his own decisions, his trust in the wrong people, and what he really wanted for the future. This period of reflection helped him redefine his priorities. His relationship with his family, which had been shaken by Michael's lies and manipulation, began to heal. His parents and his sister, Anna, were now by his side, supporting him as he took control of his life again. There was a sincere reconnection, and John felt that, despite the scars, they were ready to move forward together. One day, John decided to visit a special place, the family's beach house, where he and Emily used to spend their summers. The house, located on a secluded beach, had always been a refuge for him, a place where he could escape the pressures of the corporate world. Upon arriving, John felt a wave of nostalgia but also a sense of renewal. As he walked along the sand, watching the waves gently breaking on the shore, John thought about everything that had happened. The suffering, the betrayal, the loss. All seemed so distant now, almost as if it belonged to another life. He realized that, despite everything, he had found something valuable: the resilience to face adversity and the courage to start over. John knew that the road ahead would still have challenges, but he was ready to face them. He had learned that sometimes you have to lose everything to discover what truly matters. And above all, he knew that what mattered most now was living an authentic life, free from the shadows of the past. In the distance, the sun began to set, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink. John smiled, feeling the gentle breeze on his face. He knew he couldn't change what had happened, but he could choose how to live from now on. And with that choice came a new sense of peace. With bare feet in the sand and the sound of the waves in the background, John began to walk back to the house. The journey here had been long and painful, but he was ready to move forward. This was indeed a new beginning,